Get ready to be inspired. Today I have Melissa Oland of Oho Interiors here in the Minneapolis area on the podcast. I am so excited to have this conversation with her. We dive into how she juggles small business and motherhood, how she pivoted from one business to the next, starting out in the corporate world, and she shares her fertility journey and the struggles within that. This interview is really powerful, and I'm just so excited for you to hear it. Let's dive in. You're listening to the Girl Get Your Face Off a Bus Bench podcast, where we invite you to check your ego at the app, grab a cup of coffee, and get ready to dive into all things real estate marketing, social media, friendship, hardship, love, money mindset, and all the things that celebrate you as a badass boss babe.
We're here to encourage you, show up for you, give you a loving kick in the pants when you need it most, and be your soft place to land on the hardest of days. So pull up a seat at our table and get ready to be inspired and start living your best life by design.
Welcome to the Girl Get Your Face Off a Bus Bench podcast. We are so excited you're here.
Okay, girls, let's dive in.
Okay, Bus Bench Faves, I have Melissa Oland of Oho Interiors here today with me. I'm so excited for this interview. Let me just tell you a little bit about her. Her and I met when we were both in the photography world, and she was voted one of Brides Magazine's best photographers in the world. I kid you not, this woman is talented. She's going to share with us how she took the pivot from the corporate world into small business and then into another small business, how she juggles marriage, motherhood, and all things interior design and small business, her fertility journey, and the mental health awareness around it. Welcome to the show, Melissa. I'm so excited to have you here and see your face.
I'm so excited to see yours too.
So we go back, how many years?
I think we decided 8, right?
But that's just when you photographed our wedding.
Right.
We go back to the photo days.
Yeah. So I feel like minimum 10 years, right?
Minimum of 10 years.
Yeah.
And you have been with us through some of our biggest moments. I'm just going to kind of get emotional here for a second.
Do it.
Melissa, so we both met when we were in photography with our photography businesses and in a photography group. And I just have always adored her so much. Being in her presence, I wish you could all be here right now because she just makes you feel good. You're being hugged just by being around her. Also, she hugs, which is nice. I love it. But she photographed our wedding. We eloped in Mexico, Ryan and I, and you went there with us, photographed our wedding, and you have photographed Kaya up until you pivoted your businesses, and you've just been such a great human in my life. So I'm just so excited to have you here. And that's a little bit about how we know each other, but why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, first of all, I'm thrilled to be here. It is such an honor, first of all, to be here because we talked about, it's the first time I've been on a podcast, which feels weird, but also very cool.
It's awesome.
But also just to be with you in general, especially after so many years of kind of being apart, forced by, life circumstances, but also my abandonment of photography itself. Sorry. So let me tell you a little bit about myself, I guess. My name is Melissa Oland. I am the principal designer at Oho Interiors, which has been in existence since 2019. But I also am married, have been married to the love of my life for almost 17 years, and I am 38, so please don't do that math, please. And then we have a 3-year-old daughter named Rowan who, is the love of my life and also filled with all of my sass, so that's fun. And then we have a dog named Charlie, and basically there is nothing else in my life besides those things, but such is life.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for being here. I have so many awesome questions for you, and I'm just really thrilled to do this interview. So I'm going to dive right in if you're okay with that, because I think it's going to get a little bit long.
Love it.
Okay, so we've known each other for such a long time, and something that I find so inspiring about you is you took a successful corporate career and pivoted into a booming business, photography. Yeah. And then you transitioned into another successful small business, interior designs. So you actually had the courage to take this leap and you did it twice.
Sure.
And this is not easy.
No.
It's just not. So can you share a little bit more about this and how you were actually able to do it?
Yeah. Yes. So I think there are multiple things at play, but like, let's talk about the first sort of corporate to photography switch. That was probably one of the more groundbreaking changes in my life, just as a young, mid 20 something person. Changing from corporate to an entrepreneurship life is an intense change.
It's big.
It's
really
huge.
big. Yes.
It's huge. But I think that my age combined with some of the other factors that were going on in my life, one being that my husband at the time had a steady job and a steady paycheck and steady health care, that I didn't have to worry about those things. So I got to make that leap without having sort of the fears of maybe someone who might be doing it on their own, or someone who might not have that safety net under them. So maybe less courage on that one and more blind luck for that one. But I think what happened when I needed to make that switch is that I was finding that photography was really taking over my life, and I wasn't dedicating enough time to either thing in my life. So it really needed to be, I had to find a focus, and I had to, photography was my path forward for that. The switch from photography to interior design definitely had a lot to do with life circumstances. I kind of affectionately refer to 2016 as like the worst year of my life, period. And putting that in context with like everything else that's going on in life, that was a worst year of my life. Like, my grandfather died, my mom was diagnosed with cancer and had to have major surgery. And that was also the year we found out we couldn't have biological kids. And as a wedding photographer, you're sort of contractually obligated to show up and be a part of someone's day, no matter what's going on in your life. And all of those things kind of coincided at the same time. Like, I got the call my grandfather was going into hospice 30 minutes before I had to shoot a wedding. And
oh my gosh.
Got the call that we couldn't have biological kids 3 days before I had to shoot like the biggest, most expensive, most pressure-filled wedding of my life. So those things, it made it very clear that that is not a sustainable business model, that if I have to always be the person to show up and do the job. So at that point, that started like a 2-year kickoff of basically being as introspective as possible to try and figure out where I wanted to land from a career perspective. Interior design wasn't necessarily front of mind for me, which is ironic. In a lot of ways, I started going to college for interior design. Never ended up getting a degree in interior design due to a whole bunch of things, but mainly a conversation with a professor that was, it was well-meaning, but it scared the pants off of me, just because 2001 was a different design industry than it is now. So interior design, I've always loved it, but it never felt like the natural next step for me. So I explored like being a floral designer. I explored real estate, explored a bunch of things. But what I kind of had to understand was that I needed a business that I could eventually scale, where I wasn't going to be the main person that had to show up and do the job always, because that's just not how life would go for me. So eventually interior design kind of worked its way into my subconscious, and it kind of became I'll just try this on the side. I'll just see what happens. And then in 2019, as I had decided to not take any more weddings or any more clients, it was sort of like do or die. And I essentially said, I'm going to give it a year. See if design takes off. And if not, I'm going to go back to a corporate job, because I don't know what my skill set is beyond, running a business, which is not nothing, right? Not, that skill set is vast. But once I made that call in mid 2019 and started the business, immediately I had clients. And then March 2020 rolls around into the pandemic, and everyone has a focus on their house. So the business itself.
I didn't even think about that until you just said that.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was transformational for the business, and it blew up in a perfect way, in an overwhelming way. But it made it very clear that interior design was the path forward for me. So, yeah.
Wow. That's great.
Yeah, that was a lot.
Wow. That's incredible. So you started, just to kind of go back to like social a little bit, you had the page Oho House
Yep.
a little bit earlier that you kind of,
Yeah.
is that because, did you kind of do that thinking like maybe I'll dabble into this someday, so let me kind of see where this goes? Or did you have any intention behind that when you started posting?
No, I had absolutely no intention of like that being anything more than just documenting our like mishaps, essentially mishaps in home renovation. And what kind of developed from there is that I just basically got some sort of following that liked the home aspect part of it. So the transition into interior design was a really natural one for that audience fit, but it was never, I had that for years. I mean, even while I was doing photography years prior. So
it's so interesting. Like if you think the woo side of this, or like the universe showing up, like
Right?
it really, once you allowed it to kind of come in,
yeah, exactly.
it really did.
Yeah.
And you had already put the pieces in place to kind of start it.
Yeah. It is, looking back at things in life, it always feels like there's a lead up to like, oh, well, that's why I went through that one thing, because it taught me this skill set that now I need and use every day. But social media is a huge piece of it, because I do think that played a massive part in my success in design currently, is because I did have a following and I had some sort of portfolio, though it was my own house, but a portfolio to show people
A
what I
stunning
can
portfolio.
do. Yeah,
Stunning at that.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. Wow, that's incredible. And such a long journey, but like amazing where you ended up here, and like who knows where it'll go.
I know,
Who
right?
knows?
I know.
So you kind of chatted about the transition of why you transitioned from photography to interior design, like really personal reasons based. And can you touch a little bit more on that and what the process looked like? And also, what did the process look like from when you transitioned from corporate to photography? Because it wasn't just like the next day you're doing it, right? There was like a process that you went through. I'd love to hear more about that.
Sure. So let me start with photography to interior design, just because that is the most recent thing. And, that's what happened soonest or most recent. The process for me was essentially determining a date that I was going to be transitioning, and knowing that like, no matter how many people kind of came and said, would you photograph this wedding, or would you do this thing? Like I needed it to be a clean break. So for me, that I actually had ended up booking a wedding for New Year's Eve on 2019 to New Year's Eve of 2020. So that was my easy cut date of saying like, this is when the photography business was going to end. But I had such good processes in place that I had basically outsourced the majority of my editing. I had outsourced a lot of the things that I was doing day to day, or gotten very, very efficient at it. So I actually had a lot of extra time in 2019 to be able to take up interior design projects. And what that looked like for me, because, most people who are strangers aren't going to hire someone who has no experience in interior design, is that I just asked friends and said like, are any of you going through a remodel, or does anyone want to refresh their room, their family room, or whatever? And I had a lot of willing friends who were able to allow me to assist them with that. And there is, with any position in any industry, there's the adage of like, you can't understand the industry until you're in it. And I think interior design is especially like that, because there are so many subsects of like, will you just be doing furnishings, or will you be doing like full scale remodels or things like that? So getting my toes wet was a really, really helpful and useful thing to do during 2019. And then by the end of 2019, I had my first paying client.
That's great. That's quick.
Yeah.
That's really quick.
Thank you. It did not feel quick. It felt like it was taking forever. But by then I had my first paying client and kind of had my feet wet. I knew what I was doing. I knew like trade accounts and things like that. And then it really just got to scale from there. After that, it kind of snowballed in a really authentic way. But one of the main ways that I capitalized on my social media following was to post about those things, to show what I was doing, to put it out there that this was this new thing I was doing, and I wasn't going to be doing photography anymore. And I think that piece of it was a really important and crucial piece of how my business was able to grow as quickly as it was. It's because I was willing to be vulnerable and share those things and share mishaps online. from corporate life to photography, that was very much, that wasn't as clean of a break. That was very much, I was working as much as I possibly could, working daytime hours during my corporate job and then going home and either photographing or editing or doing all of those things. And it got to the point where it felt like this is not the life I want to lead. I don't, that was even before we had children or a child. But for me, that was very much a process of understanding sort of my bandwidth and knowing that like I needed to have more hours to grow my photography business the way that I wanted to. And so telling my employer I'm going to leave and I'm just going to hope that the business is there. That was very much my process in photography. So it was a blind leap and luck and not smart. Not smart. Don't do that.
Is it not smart though? Because if you think if all the signs are there and I'm honoring myself, I'm honoring my marriage, I'm going to show up for myself and I'm actually going to do something that I truly want to do and give it my all. Yeah. If you don't take that leap all the way in,
it's true.
Like you have to lose sight of the shore, right?
It's
like that sort of thing. So not smart, but successful. Yeah. And a great decision.
Well, and I think a lot of it too, especially is listening to those inner voices inside your body that are just saying like, this is not, finance is not the path for you. Like that was screaming in my ear 24/7 for that. And I knew I had the skill set to be an entrepreneur. I knew that I was type A enough. I was organizationally driven. I knew I could do that side of the business. The creative side of it, the photography side is what scared me the most. Which, even running a business now, like I can run a business. The creative side of it is what scares me the most. So that's, I think, like understanding and honoring those voices that say like, you can do this, you have this handled, and don't let fear get that, have the final say, right?
That's actually really powerful. To be in that place and to listen to it. Especially in your 20s. Are you kidding me? Like, I wasn't listening to that voice in my 20s. That's amazing.
Yeah, I think, there's a lot of inner work that kind of happens in the in-between of all of this, right? Like understanding who you are as a human and how different we are as humans, just person to person. But like one of my core strengths is listening, is being always self-analytical and listening to those voices inside my head that maybe sound a little crazy when I say it like that, but always listening to that inner voice. That's something that has always been a really strong part of my personality. And I know for other people, it takes some personal development to get to that point.
Sure. I have a question here about the photography that I don't think I've ever asked you. Yeah. I'm curious. Oh. Are you self-taught? So you talk about doing that like when you're in the corporate world. Yeah. Did you teach yourself most of that? Okay.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. What ended up happening is my dad he was a hobby photographer. So there were always cameras around. My mom's always the person who was like, let's take pictures. And I think it was like one trip out. They lived on the East Coast. They lived at that time near DC. And so I just picked up one of his old film cameras. We went to DC. We went to the 9/11 museum. And I just basically took a bunch of pictures, not knowing anything about cameras. It was a fully manual camera. There's no world in which any of these photos should have turned out. But there were unfortunately out of a roll of like 36, there were probably maybe 3 photos that were actually in focus and well exposed. And it ignited something inside of me that was like, okay, so I have never felt like a creative ever in my life. And to feel like I had some creative impulses, that felt so powerful to me that I wanted to pursue. So then just, naturally going around and taking pictures at the sculpture garden. And then eventually someone a friend asking if they could be in front of my camera. Like that's very much how my photography business started. It's very organic and completely self-taught.
This is truly amazing, and that you didn't see yourself as a creative, because I'm just going to say this because it's the reality. She is so talented. Melissa's photography,
I'm sweating right now.
It's so good. It's just beyond good. And if they go check you out on Instagram now, they'll see your interiors, which are beautiful. But her work with other people, you're, getting that human connection, it's really special. That really honestly. So that's really cool to hear, because I don't think I knew that story.
Yeah. I probably kept it pretty under lock and key, just because I while as I mentioned, having being always self-analytical always comes with that voice inside my head, that like inner critic that is always chirping in my ear. So I really struggle with imposter syndrome, always have really struggled with imposter syndrome, and really did with photography, and probably was not as vulnerable as I could have been in sharing my story that way, because it just felt like, well, then people won't view me as legitimate. And I still struggle with that with design, but I think that's probably why I never told anyone that.
Imposter syndrome is a beast, and it shows up, and we've talked about it quite a bit on the show, actually.
Yeah.
And in this community as well. And it's just like learning how to sit with it. Like, it's probably not going to go away.
Yeah.
And learning
100%.
to sit with it and still work through it, which you've done.
Yes.
Which is awesome. Also, amazing that like when you photographed us, or me in particular, like my imposter syndrome goes away because she gets every best angle. Like, let's just say that right there. Every best angle. I'm like, oh, I do look good. Like, oh, I can do this. I can do anything. So that was an incredible piece too. I love that. Okay, so I have a kind of a fun question for you.
Okay.
How the heck do you keep like your sanity and like your wits about you when you're managing clients and your own home remodel?
Yeah.
You're renovating a 1940s home, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so like how do you do that?
Yeah.
Manage life, motherhood, marriage, your interior design business, and not lose your mind. I would love to know. I'm like sitting back with my beverage here, and I'm going to listen.
Well, I don't. I do not have it all together. I feel very much like the analogy of the duck, gliding gracefully along the lake, who is like furiously paddling for their life underneath the surface. Like, that is me. I am furiously paddling for my life under the surface. But I got some really good advice really early on, like really, really early on in my career, like, 15 plus years ago, that work-life balance is a bit of a farce. Like, and maybe this is going to be really controversial.
100%, okay. Melissa, 100%.
Okay, good. Yeah, I think that for me, that looks like I am always strategizing and analyzing areas of my life that can give at any given moment. So sometimes we go weeks without addressing any sort of home renovation things because we just don't have time. Or analyzing if Matt has the emotional and physical bandwidth to take on more of the household duties or more of the parenting because of, my workload feels really heavy. Or even just understanding like some things for a client, requests don't have to be turned around in 24 hours. Sometimes those things can wait. So I'm constantly playing that, that game of like, which can give right now, because there is no world in which I can do that all myself and do it well. And I do constantly, routinely have essentially what are emotional like releases where I have to acknowledge that I'm not doing as well as I think I am. But I think those are necessary because those sort of reset that like pressure. It's like a pressure cooker. Like, I have to release something. And for me, it's usually an emotional release. And for me, it usually involves a lot of crying and snot going down my face, and it's beautiful. But that is a necessary part of who I am.
So I have a dear friend, Allison Burns of Ally Marie Design, who I've mentioned on here before, and she says like finding harmony. Yeah. And so like balance is, I believe it's a joke. I think every season has like different things that you're going to be required to do or where you need to show up. And so like she says she tries to find harmony. And I've sort of like hung on to that word because I think it really, it feels right. Yeah. You're just trying to figure out how to flow, your life to flow with as like minimal total breakdowns as possible. At least that's kind of my goal.
Yeah. Yeah. Mostly. Well, and go ahead. Sorry.
Or just have the breakdowns and then you get the release and move on and whatever.
Well, and I think that there is that like element of if you do believe that a balance exists, that you are always searching for something to kind of help go towards that balance, which is not a bad thing. But for me, I decided my energy needed to be diverted to a different area. So instead of trying to seek that balance, I understand that I'm not ever going to reach it. Like, my personality type will probably never find a sense of balance. So for me, that energy is diverted towards, other things that are of need at that moment. So it is, I think it really is an individual thing, is to understand like what you need in life and what propels you forward and what drives you, because like finding balance does not drive me at all.
I love that so much. Like, I'm just like, ooh. It's so good. Okay, so you have a beautiful and strong presence on social media. Your business does, you do. And your grid it's stunning. It's just absolutely beautiful. With all the moving pieces of a small business and life, right? Motherhood, marriage, how do you tackle the social media marketing, that side of it?
Yeah, great question. I think I currently am definitely in the middle of what is probably going to be a pivot for my social media. So as of, the Melissa now and the Melissa in the recent past, like my social media strategy has very much revolved around trying to show up, 3 or 4 times in my feed a week. I'm failing miserably at that, just FYI. And then also trying to show up in stories, because I think my stories have been a really powerful way for me to really, really connect with people online.
I love your stories.
Oh, thank you.
I'm like, just going to pause you for a second.
Okay.
I love them so much. And I love seeing Matt and Rose so much. I'm also sometimes like, I feel like hot and panicky when I see what you're going through. I'm like, with your remodel. But I love how you show up there.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think the design industry in and of itself can be a bit shrouded in mystery. And I think one of my great joys in life is to basically pull back the veil and revealing like what things are like in reality. And I really have never wanted to, as much as vulnerability kind of is scary for me and is hard for me as a personality type, like that is something that is really important for me to do online, because home renovation is a beast. It is a beast. And it never goes as planned, ever, ever. And that's true for client projects too. There's always some point of pivot. So back to your question about social media, there is some level of strategy there that I have tried to fulfill. I have always looked at social media as something that I didn't want to feel like another job. But actually it was one of your recent podcasts, the one on the creative, like hiring a creative is a must. It really resonated with me because I think I've been so resistant to doing that for myself, because I felt like I needed to control it and it needed to be me. And Oho House has been so much a part of our house and our lives. But I see that there needs to be eventually a pivot for the business. If the business is going to scale, there needs to be some sort of pivot. And I'm not completely sure what that looks like currently, whether that looks like a different handle that is all the design business and then I keep my current one, like still figuring all of that out. But social media has been such a huge part of my success, really, and really my connection point with people, and really a lot of encouragement happens there, but there has also come with a lot of frustration. That is not to be discounted. So
it can feel sometimes a little bit overwhelming, right?
It can. Yeah.
I totally get like why some are hesitant to even get on there altogether. Yeah. And when we talk like real estate, which a lot of our listeners are realtors, not all small business owners and realtors, mostly women, and you're trying to start this business and you're trying to juggle all these things. And then you think social media and tackling that feels like such a beast.
Yeah.
And then all these things they tell you to do on there. And it can feel completely overwhelming. And I do understand why you just kind of get paralyzed and you don't want to do it because you're just not sure where to go. And we've talked about on here too, how like imposter syndrome comes up.
Yep.
Or viewing it as like more of like a competitive place to be, or just not viewing it in a different way.
Yeah.
When really there's so much beauty in connecting with the community on there.
Absolutely.
There's the flip side of it.
Yeah.
And I love that you brought that up, because for us, it's been really incredible as well. Like actually engaging and connecting and using it as this tool for connection.
Yeah.
Of course, it's a marketing tool, but using it for so much more.
Yeah.
Is huge.
Yeah. And I think, and especially, home design and real estate kind of in some ways go hand in hand. So there's a lot of parallels that I see some of the people that I follow who are, realtors or real estate agents in the area using it as a way to document their personal lives, but also document the business work that they're doing. And I think having a good balance of both is truly the pathway to like allowing that connection point, or like, the way that some other people have done, or, bus bench, has done, like creating a niche for that, for those that to form that community. And I think that that's a really important piece of it, is figuring out where your niche is. Because if I wasn't if interior design didn't find me and I was talking about a whole different career on my Instagram, like I think it wouldn't play as well together.
Yeah, really finding your people.
Yes.
And finding your community. And
yes.
it can be such a beautiful place, really. And that sounds so cheesy.
Yeah.
But the reality is that exists in addition to the other stuff.
Yeah. Sure.
But it does exist on there. So
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I'd love to know, in your own words, how you describe your interior design style.
I love this question and I hate this question at the same time. But I think I really have very recently kind of put a like hammer nail in the coffin of like, what is my design style? And I would call it updated traditional. There is a lot of flexibility in that wheelhouse, but basically what it means is that I love traditional interior design, but with a fresh or modern sometimes application. So yeah.
Okay, cool. I love it. I mean, it totally makes sense because your style is very unique. It is unique, which that word's so overused. I'm sure in interior design it's overused as well, unique. But
yeah,
I love it. It's just so different. Like I'm not really seeing that elsewhere.
Yeah, it's
in a good way. In a good way. Just
Melissa, what are you doing?
I'm not sure about that.
I do think that like updated traditional has a lot of varying applications. Like you could look at someone like an Amber Interiors and call her, design updated traditional, because she does have a lot of traditional elements in her design. It is more modern leaning. But then you can look at a designer like, like Jean Stauffer, and her design is very traditional in application, but she uses a lot of things like modern light fixtures to kind of freshen up the design. So there's a lot of like movement within that, which I find really powerful, in that like I don't have to be pigeonholed into doing just one thing, but there are always one or two really consistent things in my projects, and one of them is millwork, adding millwork to walls or ceilings.
So
and
pretty.
I love a good tongue and groove.
As an owner of a 1909 home myself,
Yes.
like the traditional piece of it, I'm like,
yes,
it's gorgeous.
It just feels like cozy and kind of it's kind of a nod to like the interior design of yesteryear, but I also think that like doing it in a way that makes it feel so fresh is exactly what brings it to life in 2022.
Okay, so with your style, right?
Yeah.
That how do you take that and help a client's like vision come to life?
Yeah.
Like what does that look like for you or for them, or how do you mesh it or take theirs, or like what does that look like?
Yeah, so a lot of it is honestly fact finding on the front end, even before they've hired me, and then a lot on the front end of after they've hired me, and then continually throughout the process, because I don't, most people can't necessarily identify like their immediate hates and loves right away. They need time to, or see it. They'll see it and they'll be like, I hate that. So on the front end of things, I definitely want to have that conversation with them about like, who inspires you? Like what spaces do you go into that feel inspirational, to even understand if we're a good fit to begin with. And then after that, if they have decided to move forward, there is a decent amount of time spent to fact finding and understanding how they live. Because if I understand visually, aesthetically where they want to head towards, then I can understand like the function of, we can start talking about the function of how they live. So do they need to have a surface when they watch TV? Do they want to put their feet up on a soft surface? Or in kitchen design, do they love drawers more than they love cabinet doors? Just things like simple things like that inform the function. And then we basically set sort of a visual parameter with where we're headed. Say like we're going for a natural and fresh, updated traditional kind of look. And then every decision we made is within that specified wheelhouse. So everything kind of gets approved along the way. And there's also that trust building of like, I know at a certain point in every project, a client will sort of lose the final vision. They'll lose the trust or they'll lose the vision that things are going to turn out the way that we have been planning. And that's the point at which we say, here's the wheelhouse that we've been operating into. You have to trust that I know where we're headed and we're going to get there. And every time we do, but it's just a journey. It's a journey every single time. So that is very much taking their wants for function and then translating those into visual application.
Oh, I love that. So what would you say is your favorite thing about the job or the outcome or the client experience? Like, do you have something that you just love every single time?
Yeah, I do. I think for me, a driver in the business in and of itself is that I believe that homes are a crucially important thing in our lives. And so I am always working towards crafting homes for people that make them feel safe and loved and exactly how they want to feel in their homes, which for most people is some, either cozy or like an elevated casual or, some level of that kind of genre. That is my favorite thing, to get to the final part of the project and for someone to be like, this feels exactly like how I wanted it to feel.
Oh, I just got goosebumps.
I know. That is
safe and loved exactly how
I know. It's a little, HGTV has kind of played out that moment a little bit, but with every project, there's just a moment where the client sort of walks into the space and sees it as a whole, the sum of all these parts that you've been working so hard on. And they really you see this breath of relief almost.
Like they're home.
Yes, exactly.
I would cry. Do you cry?
Oh,
yeah.
100% cry. 100%. Yeah.
Were you totally the photographer behind the camera crying at weddings? Because I was
all the time.
Trying to focus. This needs to go in autofocus now because I have mascara in my eyes.
Yes. Yeah. Often.
Okay.
Yeah. I was like, anytime especially if I see anyone cry, like a mother of the bride or my clients cry, I'm just
grandpas?
Like, done.
Done. Just done.
Yeah.
The grandpas, they would
they're so
always
cute.
get me. They are so cute.
Oh.
So kind of like taking turns a little bit here. And another thing that I just really, as a woman, as a mama, just find like so impactful, like seeing you share this and knowing you, is you shared your fertility struggles and the stress that's placed on your mental health, your life, business, marriage. And in doing so, you have truly helped other women feel less alone. I can vouch for that myself.
Oh.
And through our recent losses, like really knowing that I wasn't alone was a huge piece for me, because community did exist and it was actually being spoken about. And it wasn't like so taboo to speak about. So I can't say enough, like, I'm going to start crying here.
Yeah.
How much like just knowing that I wasn't alone and someone else had experienced, something else was really, I guess, powerful for me and less isolating. So when we look at, like, the majority of our listeners are women, and when we look at statistics, we know many of us share the same struggles. And I'd love to hold some space for them and have you share your journey with us and what that's looked like for you.
Sure. And I want to preface all of this by saying the reason why we can all, I feel like the reason why we can all talk about it more openly now is because of people like you who are willing to hold space for this conversation, because it is such a thing that for women, it's so personal and there feels like a lot of shame and a lot of loneliness there that like it is, having these conversations is so crucially important, especially if you're in the middle of it, but even if you're on the, outside of it, because those things never leave you. They always a part of you. It will change you to your core.
Yes.
So thank you for holding space for those conversations. So, my infertility struggle. Well, okay. So let me start by saying this. You probably already did the math. Matt's my husband. Matt and I got married very young. I was 21. He was 22. We were clearly in no place to have kids. Like, we were kids ourselves. So we kind of joked and had like the 10-year plan of like, okay, we'll make the evaluation around when we hit 30. Like, do we want to be parents? Does that make sense? Well, my, whatever biological inner clock started ticking almost right around there. And we decided like, yes, we would like to be parents. We're ready. Let's do the thing. So we pulled the proverbial goalie, or sometimes actual goalie. Sorry. And then, you know, the healthcare, the way it was back then, I don't know if it is the way it is now, but the adage was to try naturally for a year. And if nothing happens for you, then that's when you sort of start to talk about infertility. So we tried our darndest for a year and nothing happened for us. And I was always the person who had a really regular cycle, like 25 days, last 5 days, you know, every single time since I was a teenager. And right around the time we started kind of trying naturally, it went haywire. Like my cycle became super irregular, which, you know, talking to my doctor, she was like, it's probably stress. You're probably stressed about trying. You just need to kind of breathe and relax.
So easy when you're trying.
Yeah, it's like someone telling you to chill. It like does the opposite thing, but that's neither here nor there. So we tried for a year and nothing happened for us. And so we went back to the doctor and they did their, you know, baseline testing and nothing showed up. So at that point we were diagnosed with unexplained infertility and they moved us to a fertility clinic. And I'm not sure if it's the same again, but they always want to do I think it's like day 3 testing where like they want to get you on day 3 of your cycle to test all of your hormone levels, etc. I never had a day 3. Like my cycle at that point had gotten so irregular that like I wasn't even having a period at all. So I called them and told them, they're like, yeah, that's probably not normal. So come on in, let's do some testing. And within, I think it was like 24 hours, we had gotten a call from the clinic saying, your hormone levels are showing that you are in menopause. And I was 31, I think, when I got that call. And that was out of nowhere. Like, you know, my mom had some a couple miscarriages between myself and my brother. But other than that, we didn't have any sort of indication that getting pregnant was going to be an issue for us. So, that was devastating. Because that testing didn't provide the level of detail to understand like where it was coming from. And we needed to understand what our fertility options were to understand what the cause of it was. We did some further testing, some genetic testing, and found out I was a carrier for a genetic mutation called Fragile X. And what that does in women who are carriers is that it basically puts your body into premature menopause. So that was a foundational change in who I am as a human. I think like that day I became a new person. And we entered the bulk of what I would probably call like our infertility years. And that for us, the options were essentially to either have IVF with donor eggs, to do a surrogacy with donor eggs, or to adopt. And the idea of IVF for me was too much. Like mentally, I just couldn't get there. And I was, you know, with that information, I was like not in a great place. And I think anyone who's been through infertility, like that's probably putting it lightly. Like it was devastating on a level that is hard to explain unless you've been there. So we decided to pursue adoption because that felt like, to me, that was the outcome that I wanted. And now on this side of things and understanding like some of the nuances of adoption, like I think we would still traverse that path again if I were, you know, 31-year-old Melissa, but it foundationally changed who I was. So we did enter into an adoption. In the state of Minnesota, you have to go through an agency. So we went through an agency and went through all of their legwork of preparing you to adopt, which is a lot of essentially counseling and then some, you know, like visits to your home to make sure that you are a qualified parent or could be a qualified parent. And then very, very early on for us, the process was very idyllic, if you can call it that. We've had friends who have really gone through some really tough things with adoption. So we were very, very lucky and blessed to have had an easy road. And we ended up with our daughter, Rowan, who is 3 now. And her birth mom is probably one of the most generous, definitely one of the most generous humble, kind people on the planet. And she gave us like the greatest gift of our lives. And that, I will say, as someone who is, you know, we don't know if our family is complete, to be totally frank with you. But as someone who is sort of on the quote unquote other side of infertility, like there's still grief there, right? Like there's still, even just seeing, you know, someone give birth on TV. And I know for you, we both had very challenging entrances into motherhood in very different ways. But seeing someone give birth on a TV show can send me into like, you know, a 48-hour spiral of just feeling like grief and shame and all of that. And I think one of the ways that I have learned to deal with all of that is by talking about it, because being alone in those feelings is so brutal. It's so brutal.
Isolating.
It's
so isolating.
It is.
That for us, like, and it takes a lot to get there to talk about it.
It does.
But through our recent losses, I need to reach out to my friends. Like I need to build my community, and it makes it, I don't want to say easier, but it's less alone. It feels less alone.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that you brought up the grief just doesn't go away.
Yeah.
Because, you know, whether you're in it still, the thick of, you know, infertility, or you're just dealing with, like, you know, miscarriages and not sure where that's going to go for you. Mm-hmm. It's such a hard place to be in that limbo, or whether you're on the other side of, I just know I can't.
Yeah.
And it's a really, really hard place to be if you're trying to do it alone. And I know so many women are, and maybe not by choice.
Sure.
But you just aren't sure how to reach out or who to talk to. And then those waves of grief come, and you don't know how to place them, or you don't know where to go with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think even some of our, you know, most well-intentioned family members just couldn't understand. They had not traversed that road themselves. And that felt very isolating. Like when your normal support system doesn't feel like those aren't the people you can rely on to understand and to provide the right level of support you might need at that time, or say the right things. And people are going to say the wrong things. It's inevitable. But having community, or even just finding people who are just willing to sit there and listen to you say the ugly things that you're thinking in your head that you don't want to admit to anyone else.
Yeah.
Like just having people who will give space to that is, if you don't have that one person, like call me, honestly.
Right. Yes. Call us,
Yeah.
call us, because that is, friends, I don't know. I'm sorry. Like, I don't know what to do, but I'm sorry. And like, what can I do? You just listen.
Yep.
Just listen.
Yep.
And hold space for me.
Yep.
And that's truly why I wanted to have this conversation on here, because the space pieces, as I think where like healing can happen.
Yeah.
So I really, really, I'm so glad that you're willing to talk about this and share your story.
Thank you for letting me.
Yeah, I would love if you could share a little bit more about like the mental health piece of it, like the impact of like that on you personally and in business, and you know, the decision making to go, you know, into adoption, and you know, and I also want to touch on the fact that you, since I've heard of like your adoption story, you have always spoken so highly of Rose, biological mom.
Yeah.
And there's so much beauty in that.
Yeah.
So I would just love it if you could touch a little bit more on those, if you're willing to share.
Sure. So I think, you know, that 2016 disastrous year of my life happened obviously before we had kids, or, you know, before we started a family, and that understanding that like there would be things that happened in life that like I needed to have a business that didn't require me to be that main person. And that was honestly the main driving force for shutting down my business, for shutting down my photography business and starting interior design, because my photography business just would never scale. There was no scalability there. Interior design, I have grand, huge plans about it, which we can talk about in a minute. But that is a business that can scale, and I want to scale because I want to be able to be the mom that shows up for dance recitals or soccer games or tennis matches or whatever, and not the mom that has to be, you know, photographing a wedding on a Saturday, or, you know, to working because no one else can do the job for me. So that, I feel like those decisions were foundational to me even before becoming a mom, understanding that like that was the life I wanted to create. And I had to get to a point in business where like that was going to be possible. Now, currently, we're in the early years of Oho Interiors, and there's many, I haven't scaled yet. So there are things that I know I am currently missing out on that will hopefully not be an issue in the future. But that is the ultimate goal. The mental health piece of it, it has been, something that I think even as recently as 2016, like we didn't talk about it the way that we talk about mental health as openly as we talk about it now. And I think I would not have been able to put that label on it at that time because I don't think I really realized it. But my mental health was like the thing that took a dive for me. And even showing up to perform my job meant that I had to, in photography, meant that I had to compartmentalize in a way that was not healthy. Everyone has to do it on some level, right? We have to like operate in this world carrying burdens that are not appropriate to bring into the world in its current state, right? So like we all have to do it in some capacity, but the idea is if you compartmentalize that you eventually kind of go back to that and kind of like process and heal and do what you need to do to kind of move through that. My personality type did not necessarily allow me to go back to, I put it in a box and I shoved it in the closet and I did not deal with it.
I will deal with you. Never, never, unless you force me to.
100%. And I think my closet got very full and it forced me to deal with things. And it came out in ways that were not flattering, but were almost purely contained to my relationship with Matt. Right? Like he was the person who was going through this with me. He was the closest person to me. And it really, the burden of dealing with who I was as someone who was not dealing with her mental health struggles landed on Matt. And in a lot of ways that came out in postpartum. I'm still struggling like to understand if I can call it postpartum, but like post-adoption depression. And it took me probably a solid 6 months to even acknowledge that I was going through some sort of depression, and probably 6 months after that to do anything about it. And that, I think that comes from a lot of shame. Like, I think I felt a lot of shame. I think I felt like you should be happy for this. Like, this is everything you wished for. You should be so grateful. And I felt nothing but grateful. Like, I felt nothing that like what grateful felt like.
And like those feelings can coexist too.
Yes.
Like it can be I have Ro.
Yes.
And like I have her, but I also I need some help.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was not in a place where I could acknowledge that. And I think everyone around me saw that. People who were closest to us saw that and said like, you need to do something because you have become an angry person. Like this is not the Melissa that we know. And I do think that there is an element to having been fundamentally changed by infertility and going through that. But I was angry, and there were times where, to be completely frank with you, I have not really admitted this publicly, but like I was scared for Ro because like I felt like a terrible mom. Like I felt like I couldn't be a mom, and that is that is
the guilt
is
with
not
that.
normal.
No, like the guilt with that too.
Normal.
It's more pressure for you. And
Right.
you just talking about when you had mentioned like not sure if you could say postpartum. Well, I think you can. I mean, that's my opinion, but you're going through the sleepless nights.
Yeah.
But whether or not you birthed her or not,
Right.
you're still experiencing that afterwards.
Yeah.
So, and everything else that comes with it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one of my sort of not missions in life, but one of the things that I find really important for friends who are becoming first-time moms is to level with them and say, like, this is going to be really hard, but you're going to get through it. Like, because I think I did not have a single friend, or if I did, I was not listening. So that could be part of it. But I felt very alone in feeling like I'd have friends who came over and who were like, I love the newborn stage. It's my favorite. And it was all I could do not to just rage at them and kick them out of my house because I was so miserable. But knowing now that everything really is a stage and everything really does pass and you will get through those things and you will get on the other side of it. And it may take a while, but you'll get there. But sometimes you just need a little help.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And there should be, I mean, for all of us, I think we come from different backgrounds and understanding like where the shame level lies there. But I implore anyone who really is struggling with that entree into motherhood to seek out someone who can listen to you, because there were dark thoughts that I had that I didn't share with anyone, including Matt. And I think that it really held me back. I think it really helped, like impeded my ability to heal and become the mom Ro needed me to be. So
how did you go from that place to today?
Yeah, good question. I think acknowledging that I could not do that alone was a huge thing for me. I tried very hard to sort of find fulfillment in being a mom because it was exactly what I had been looking for and working towards and hoping for years. But I think the acknowledgement that my personality type is fulfilled by not just being a mom, but also work. And knowing that about myself and knowing that like I couldn't just stay at home and be a stay-at-home mom. Not that that is not worthy, because like that is the hardest freaking job in the world, but it wasn't meant for me. And I knew that I needed to have work that felt validating outside of the house. And once I started trying to find who I was as a mom in combination with all the other dreams I had in life, I feel like that's when everything started opening up for me. Everything started to get lighter. I definitely should have probably seen a professional, but I did not. Instead, I leaned on friends to really be that support system and that, that therapy without having therapy. If I were to do it all again, I would march my own behind to the doctor's office and say, I need you to refer me to someone. I just was not capable of doing that myself at that time. So
I love that you brought up you have to find what works for you as a human, and that identity, I don't want to say outside of motherhood, but within it, right?
Yes.
Your new identity. Like I always say, like through, not back.
Yes.
And for me, like staying home with Kaya in the early days, and then also that desire to take on some work and to find that balance, right?
Yeah.
of the in-between. But the guilt that comes with that, each decision you make, like I'm not a stay-at-home mom enough, or I'm not working enough, or I'm not focusing on me enough. Yeah. And there's guilt and there's shame that goes with every piece of it.
Yes.
And just recently, like we are looking at like schools for Kaya.
Yeah.
And releasing the fact that she would be gone for part of the day, most days of the week.
Yeah.
The guilt of, but I thought I was going to stay home with her. But realizing my identity and who I am as a human, I can be a good mom and also be me, and also like want things that, not say want things, but like want a career and want space.
Yeah.
And so I'm so glad you brought that up, because it goes on both sides of it or in the middle of it. And I've always kind of like felt like a ping pong with it. And I've never really found my place. I always kind of felt like not enough of one of the things.
Yep.
And so really now like that's like really trying to focus on like it's okay to be a mix of it, or that like new identity.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think that there also is that there is something there is just something biological, I think, that happens for moms that creates whatever. I never in my life struggled with anxiety before becoming a mom.
Me neither.
Right?
Okay, let's just throw that out there too. Right? What is that? Come on. Like,
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And
why
suddenly,
am I like moving?
Right. Yes. And I think, I do think that there is an unspoken expectation put on burden and expectation put on women to be everything, and to like you'll be the best mom, you'll be the best worker, or you'll be one or the other, but like you have to be excel at all of it. And I think it's unreasonable, but I also think that maybe for a lot of women, and myself included, that like there is there's not a day where I feel like I did a great job at being a mom and a great job at running my business. Like there is not a single day that has happened in 3+ years. So knowing that like as she gets older, things get a little bit easier in some ways and more complicated in other ways. But knowing same with my business, it's going to get easier in some ways and worse in other ways. But like I know for myself that I can be both. I just might not feel like I'm excelling at both, but I am exactly the mom that Ro needs me to be because I have to believe that in my core, right? Like that is as much as I need validation from an external work source, like who I am at the core, like I have to be the mom she needs me to be, right?
And she's thriving.
Well, she's a little sassy, so
she's amazing.
She is amazing.
Yeah. Oh goodness. And both of our girls are 3, so it's an interesting road.
It is high highs and low lows and everything in between.
Okay, so we both have 3-year-olds. Yes. Ro's just a little bit older than Kaya, just a few months. Yeah. And we're navigating this like mamapreneurship life. And we've touched on like the balance sort of thing, but how did that shift for you? How did that balance shift for you when you became a mom? Yeah, I think things that I didn't think would be important became really important to me. And maybe it shouldn't have been a surprise, but I had wanted to be like I wanted to give her the best of everything. I wanted to like have all of the natural wood birch toys. Oh, my hands up over here. Yeah. Like I have to go all in. Yeah. I have to be 100% Montessori, 100% respectful parenting, 100%. And I think there has been a lot of freedom in acknowledging that like I can be who I am, but also like still try for being a respectful parent. Let's just sidebar here. Yes. Like respectful parenting is fine until you need to put on a snowsuit. I would just like to say that. If you're living in a cold weather state, you know what I mean. That is all. Just gonna leave that. So true. Oh my gosh, there's no rage like the getting a kid into a snowsuit rage. Yes. So I think we're in a season of life where there is a lot of time being deviated towards my business, a lot of my energy. But being able to show up for dinner almost every night is a really big priority for me. Being able to be there for her swim lessons on Saturday morning is a really big priority for me. So those things come with like not working myself too late on Friday night that I wake up at, that waking up at 7 a.m. to get to swim practice doesn't feel like a burden, right? So like those things happen. And then also on a more macro level, like I wanted to create a business that allowed me to have the freedom to be the parent that I wanted to be to her as she grew older. And that means financially growing my business to a certain point. And that also means that from a, team perspective, growing my team to a certain point so that I can deck out early, go pick her up from school, or I can do those things that feel like that makes me feel like I am fulfilling the role that I need to as a mom. So do you feel, does it excite you that you're creating a strong woman-owned business and that will show Ro that it can be different than the norm? Because for me, it's like a huge fill up. Yes. Yeah, it does. I think, I grew up very much with a mom who was very ambitious and very willing to be outspoken about her ambitions. And I think that set me up for understanding that like I was capable of anything. And I want Rose to have the same. I want her to feel like she is capable of anything. And she is who she is on the inside is someone who is built with we call them executive leadership skills. Maybe other people do, but she is that girl will conquer something or someone. I don't know. She will go do big things. And I don't want to be a part of stifling any of that, even though that brings some challenges when we're, arguing over who's going to put the socks on in the morning who's going to cut the strawberries like that. Those are battles that, my control freak does not want to battle with her control freak because I will lose every time. Yeah, just accepting that we're going to lose, right? Like,
Yes. Yes. But
why are we battling anyways?
yeah, I know. Why do
What
I
happened?
even
What
care?
happened?
Yeah. But I want her to have that that role model that I had, because it was foundational for me to do things that incited fear and do them anyway.
I love that so much.
Thanks.
Okay. So what does an average day look like for you?
Oh gosh. There is no average day in interior design, but I try to kind of structure my days so that, much like batch recording podcasts, like I try to batch my days so that I'm not spending once every day driving 30 minutes to a client project. So I do try to, one day a week, I try to kind of stack for site visits where I kind of pop around to different site visits as needed, talk to different contractors. 1 or 2 days a week, I try to set aside for actual office days to get actual work done, emails done, those important things. And then the other days are kind of fluid depending on what project load is happening or what external things are happening. But most of the time, my days are spent running around to different sites, going to showrooms to source fabric or wallpaper or look at a new furniture line. And then a lot of my days are also spent just behind a computer designing, answering emails, working on elevations. A lot of this job is very technical, so it requires a lot of detailed work.
So then for like family life, are you home like most weekends? Do you try to carve those out for family time? Or I know you'd mentioned like dinner every night, super important to you to be home if you're able.
Yeah. Yeah. Weekends. So one of the things of the photography business that, as I sort of had put a term limit on my photography business, weekends felt like that has to be a precious time. So as I was considering other avenues of like what I was going to do prior to settling on interior design, we had really considered opening a wedding venue. But I think the main thing that kind of held us back, other than, sourcing $5 million to build.
No big deal.
No big deal. Other than that minor thing, was that like it would still require a lot of weekends. So weekends to me have always, especially since photography, felt like such a holy time where I want to preserve our time. And, as we have moved into our house and started renovating, that's when the bulk of our renovation happens, because the bulk of the stuff that we do will happen on the weekend. So it's family time, it is house time, it is really precious, and we don't, it is a rare occasion when we will give that up.
And Rose like behind the scenes working too. Oh my gosh.
I love it. She is, we went through a stage in time where she like would really be into like Paw Patrol or, like watching, whatever sort of Blippi or, like those kind of things. But now she just really wants to be involved and be helpful. So like if we can give her a job, if we can give her like, okay, Ro, I need you to hold on to this, can of caulk and warm it up, like she will snuggle that thing like it is her, like her little stuffy. And, she's very helpful.
I love it. We involved Kaya in our home remodel-ish.
Yeah.
Ongoing disaster. Let's just call it what it is here. It's a shit show. But she really wants to paint.
Yes.
And I feel
terrified, right?
Flutter a little bit, but that's like when she sees that come out and I'm like, of all the things, like really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you tackled that? Has Ro tackled that?
There was a point in time where we would set out a tarp and we just gave her like a little, artist paintbrush and just kind of let her paint walls that we were working on.
Yeah.
And that is now like something she wants to do every single time. So now it's like, okay, well, Mama has to paint the beams, so you can't get up on the scaffolding. So I'll just take care of it this time. Okay, Rowie? Okay, Mama. Like she's amendable if you can explain why she can't do something for the most part.
Yeah. I love it so much.
Yeah.
Okay, so something I'd love to hear your take on is what you would say to a mama who's afraid to start. Like maybe she's afraid to make that career change or to jump all in. Maybe she's like in between. What would you say to her? Like she's fearing like, that time or that space. Like what would you say to her?
One of the best pieces of advice that I have ever sort of taken to heart on this. And it wasn't even really advice. It was just a friend saying this in relation to, honestly, to having another child, is that she said, we're doing it for our future selves. And that has stuck with me in like such a deep way that like when I'm doing things, like I'm doing it for the future Olens. Like I'm doing it for future Melissa. Like these things that are painful at that time or scary at that time are temporary, and I'm doing it for that future. So there are pieces that that will hold people back. Like the fear-based piece of things makes it really hard to kind of like leap and to do different things. But if you can think of I have to go through this momentary pain point to get to future Melissa's goals, like I think that makes it a little bit less scary, right? Or for me, it did anyway.
I would agree that does. That's a really good way of looking at it. And it's so important to like live in the now. But the reality is if you can actually say, okay, but if I do this now, this is what this could look like.
Yes.
And what door does that open?
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Okay, so I want to know, what does 2022 look like for you and your business? Mm-hmm. And what are you most excited about?
Yeah. So this is news. We will be moving to Colorado in the fall. So that is going to be a large change for my business. Matt took a new position that he is really thrilled about, and it will bring us closer to family in Colorado. And I think the pandemic made it super clear to us that we needed to be close to family. So my business will move from Minnesota.
This is a huge announcement,
Melissa. It's huge. I know. It's, you heard it here first, right? Yeah, it's so I have been really hesitant on doing anything permanent in Minnesota because of our temporary nature. So I really wanted to start basically an e-commerce arm of the business this year. And I think that is going to have to wait until we're, boots on the ground basically in Colorado, because it doesn't, moving inventory would be a massive pain. So I would still like to get e-commerce up and running in 2022.
That's exciting.
It is. It's very exciting. But it also has impacted hiring. So I haven't wanted to hire anyone here and then have to rehire in Colorado. So right now I am at capacity from a workload perspective and just sort of counting down. I've basically shut off all of my taking on new projects for now. To kind of give us some bandwidth, because we'll have to renovate our kitchen and our family room to sell the house, and just a lot of different things, right? So hopefully, 2022 will be a groundbreaking year for Oho Interiors and the Ohos. So
that's incredible.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Oh wow! Do you know where you'll land in Colorado? Have you decided?
We are looking for land somewhere outside of Denver, but before you head up Vail Mountain. So hopefully we're going to build a house, which is very exciting for me. We have wanted to do that together forever, but then hopefully we can be the stopover for all of our friends.
We're signing up.
Yes,
so
please.
If you could build that house really soon, that'd be
done.
Fantastic. That's so exciting. Oh my goodness.
Yes, it is.
Wow, 2022, here you come.
I know, it's going to be big.
Okay, so thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your time with us. And I just love you so much. I love seeing your face too.
I love you too. This has been the best.
I know.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. So tell everyone where they can find you.
Well, you can find lots of my personal house mishaps and adventures, and also detailing of my design business on at Oho_house on Instagram, or you can find my design business. It's a little more professional at ohointeriors.com.
I love it. Well, so we just dove into so many things, and I hope this episode was really uplifting for you too, as much as it was for me. So until next time, remember to keep your face off a bus bench and keep being the badass boss babe that you are. Okay, girls, are you feeling as inspired as we are? We're over here cheering you on because you just finished another episode of the Girl Get Your Face Off a Bus Bench podcast.
If you want more, head over to girlgetyourfaceoffabusbench.com for show notes and more episodes. And don't forget to subscribe and leave us a 5-star review. They mean the world to us, and they're what keep us going.
Girl, thanks for being here.